Hello and welcome to the 24th episode of the KurosawaCast, where we are tackling Akira Kurosawa's Dreams from 1990. I am, as ever, your host, Rob Beams, and I'm joined as ever by my friend Craig Ennis. Hello, Craig.
Good morning.
And the gimmick, as always, is that these are films I've seen before, that I'm a fan of. Craig coming to them very much for the first time, although for this one he did have some sour expectations that he shared with us last time round. What were your expectations for Akira Kurosawa's Dreams, Craig?
I thought this was going to be really dull and overwrought and pretentious and self-indulgent. Yeah, that was what I was expecting when I sat down to watch the film.
Specifically, you had concerns over watching another person's dreams.
Yeah, they're interesting to the people who have the dreams, and that's it. Like occasionally, you can sort of share a dream with someone you know. If it's about a third person that you both know, you can and you can get a kick out of it, but. It's rarely a conversation that starts. Let me tell you about a dream I had last night. Rarely does that conversation go in any particularly interesting way, and yet people persevere with it. They do, and I persevere with it as well. But yeah, so I was not looking forward to sitting down and watching Akira Kurosawa's recurring dreams. I was quite pleased that it was only going to be 2 hours long after a couple of long boys. I was quite pleased to see that before we watched it, to find out there was 8 of them, because that works out at about 15 minutes.
About 15
each.
minutes, yeah. Which is a nice. I mean, that's a nice structure, and a couple of them feel a lot longer than they are. But I would say, on the whole, I don't find the film mature pace-wise, because they are quite short. And actually, a couple of the best ones, I mean, I think you didn't really like any of them very much, but a couple of the ones I liked a lot are actually some of the shortest ones as well, that kind of come in and out. They're kind of very quick. I wrote down like a bunch, because the thing is, ultimately, you gave the film a 2 stars on Letterboxd. And I saw that and I thought, that's a bit harsh, because I remembered that there are bits of this, certainly visually, that I really liked. And there are bits of this that I think are really nice. There are some nice sections in it. And I thought, okay, it's not a 2-star film, surely. And then after I watched it, I decided this time watching it, I was going to give an individual mark out of 5 for each of the 8 dreams. And then my Letterboxd score would be an average. And I ended up with 2 stars as well. But before
I will say that, I mean, how did you watch it? Do you have a Blu-ray or something?
I had the Criterion Collection Blu-ray of it. So
there was a very I like the intonation there.
Yeah,
that was very. I had the Criterion Collection.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I will say that. One of the things that apparently it's got going for it is the way that it looks. Now, I sometimes use a service called Boxer Broadcasts. It's an academic learning resource that's basically like a huge cloud DVR. So you can go on there and request stuff on preview to be recorded and just left up there in perpetuity, and you can so I watch quite a lot of things that I can't get hold of otherwise through that. The recording of Dreams that I found on there was from the 22nd of September 2001 on Channel 5. So the video quality actually wasn't that great, and I will say I didn't get the full impact of the cinematography for some of the more stunning sequences. And in other sequences, which we'll talk about later, I don't think I would have gained anything from seeing that in crystal clear clarity anyway. But I'll hold my judgment on there, because I think we're going to come to blows on that one. Talking about one of the sequences that you liked that I thought was ridiculous. But
okay, well let's go through, because should
we do it one by one?
I'm going to go through dream by dream, but before I ended up giving it the same score as you, I'd already written a 3-part rebuttal as to why you're wrong, before I realised you're not wrong. That I'm going to go through, because my problem with the film is not that it's based on his dreams. Like, I get what you're saying, which is they're only interesting to the teller. You don't want to hear about someone's dreams. For me, I've got 3 reasons why I don't think that's the issue with the film. One is,
well, no, I didn't think it was going to be. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily say that was the issue with the film. That was just my preconception. Yeah, and the film was going to have to, fight an uphill battle to get past that.
Well, I've set it up now, so I'm going to go through the three things. Yeah. The first thing is that I'm very, very skeptical that any of these are literally Akira Kurosawa's dreams, because nobody dreams extremely long didactic monologues about nuclear proliferation or, the horrors of war. Because the thing is that the ones of this that I think stand up best are the ones that are more visual. And the ones, well, with the exception of one of them that's quite visual, that's very, very boring, but a lot of the ones are very visual that are good. And then even some of the better ones, even some of the ones I like, start to fall apart when somebody just starts talking at you about their philosophy on life, which is where a lot of them fall down. They're quite didactic.
Well, there's some things here that don't translate from dreams that I in this short period, I think, that I'll talk about, especially when we talk about the second one. But yeah, go on.
And then another thing was, sure, if someone says, let me tell you about a dream I had last night, that's not necessarily going to be that exciting. But if they said, let me show you a 15-minute movie that I've made beautifully about a dream I had last night, and by the way, the effects have been done by Industrial Light and Magic, I might be a bit more inclined to... why are you pulling a face at that? That's quite a good
We'll
thing.
Talk about it later. The effects have been done by Industrial Light and Magic interns, but we'll talk about that later.
But on principle, if someone said, I've got 15 minutes short of my dream, I don't think you could watch it in VHS quality on a crackly thing and then criticize the effects.
We'll talk about it in a bit.
We'll talk about it later. And then the last point of the three is that I want to go into talk about the first dream, which is probably my favorite overall, which is the Fox wedding. It's called Sunshine Through the Rain. You get basically, it starts off with a what I found out in the reading about it is an accurate replica of Akira Kurosawa's childhood home with his name written on it. It says Kurosawa on the house. And actually, the protagonist in all the dreams is referred to in the script as I, and it is supposed to be a Kurosawa stand-in, this character.
Yeah, I got that. I got that from the hat.
What happens in this first dream is that this kid's told it's rainy, come in, because the foxes have their weddings in the rain, you shouldn't watch. The kid goes into the woods, he sees a fox wedding, the foxes spot him, he runs home scared, and the mum goes, yeah, you can't come home now, you've seen a fox wedding. By the way, the foxes told me to give you this sword, you've got to kill yourself.
Yeah.
Go and find the foxes in the woods, and then apologize. Now, if that was your dream that you were telling me about, this is my final rebuttal. If that was somebody's dream, I would go, fuck, that is actually quite an interesting dream. Like, like that is quite a good one. Like, especially because it involves a child being told by a bunch of foxes via their mum through proxy to go and commit seppuku. I think that's quite an interesting one.
Do you know what? I would agree with you. And when she hands him that kind of stick, it looks like a stick, and pulls it out and it's actually a knife, you go, fuck me. Problem is, it's all downhill from there. For the rest of the film.
Yeah, for the rest of the film, for the rest of that segment, and this is where I wonder about the visual quality of what you were watching it on, because the effects of the final shot of that sequence are one of the most beautiful things Kurosawa's ever put on film, which is why I'm slightly don't understand what you're saying about the ILM. The final shot of that sequence is this amazing rainbow over this field full of different kind of flowers. There's mist, there's mountains, there's rain coming in. It's one of the most beautiful images, and that's always the one that's used on posters for it and all of these kind of things, because it's probably the most striking image in the film. So I would say that one, I know you didn't score them as you went along, but I'm going to ask you to during them. I gave that one 4 out of 5. I think that one's really good. If you just told me, forget Dreams Exist as a film, if you just said that was a Kurosawa short film that was like a 15-minute thing about this fox wedding, I would go, that's a pretty fucking good short film. I enjoyed that.
I would go, yeah, okay. I mean, I'm really tempted to score it lowly because you're clearly getting pent up by this, and I've got I have an innate I've got this innate desire to wind up anyone who I can possibly can. But for me, 3.5, because it kind of doesn't get anywhere. It got a beautiful shot at the end, but doesn't really get anywhere.
Yeah.
doesn't. I would like that to be spun out further. I'd like to see more of that. I tell you what that reminded me of a little bit. Actually, that whole thing was a little bit of, and I know it comes afterwards, obviously, but it did make me think of things like Spike Jonze's Where the Wild Things Are, and that kind of. There was something about it that I really liked. That reminded me of the sort of kids films that conscientious hipster parents put on for their kids who would rather be watching the Croods too.
Yeah, like the Red Balloon and stuff like that.
Exactly. Yeah. No, I like that. I did. I got into the first one thinking, oh, okay, this I might be wrong here. I didn't get the full effect of that final rainbow shot, I must admit, because of the quality I was looking at.
Yeah.
But yeah. I liked it, but it just seemed to peter out just as I was most interested in it, and then you get a little thing that says another dream.
I would rather they all petered out while they were interesting than what happens in the rest of them, which is that they stop being interesting much earlier on.
Excuse me a second.
So the second dream we come to is called the Peach Orchard. And basically, the story of the Peach Orchard is that he sees this little boy, he's giving his sisters or a sister and a friends or something, he's giving them all something to eat for lunch or something. And they're in this room with this shelf with all these like ceremonial dolls all tiered on this kind of tiered shelf thing, these old dolls. And he says, I bought food for 6 of you, but where's the other person gone? There's only 5 of you here. And they go, there was no 6th girl. What are you talking about? And he sees this kind of, I guess, ghostly 6th girl, and he goes chasing her into the garden, where he comes upon this area where there used to be a peach orchard that has all been cut down. And actually on this, it resembles the shelf. It's this tiered section of these kind of grass ledges on this hill. And on them, arranged like the dolls, are these kind of basically like the dolls. They're these very theatrical, old-fashioned sort of Japanese feudal royalty looking Japanese figures that are on these tiers of this thing. They basically tell him, yeah, we're going to leave here now. We're never coming back because you cut down all the peach trees. And then the kid cries and goes, but I like peach trees. And then they go, oh, all right, we'll show you some peach blossoms. That's basically the entire story.
And they do a little dance.
They do a dance.
This is for so this for me is kind of I like the start of this, and it felt like it had a bit of something to follow. One of the things that's difficult is the reason the first one is one of the better ones, or if not the best one, is because there is some sort of narrative thread to hang on to. It's loose and it's got some it's got some dream logic to it, obviously, as they all do. But this, for me, this was one of the reasons why the dreams don't necessarily translate that well to film. Is like there is an idea that the peach trees have become the dolls, which if you're dreaming that, things like that happen. Like people change. You're talking to somebody, you're talking to your dad, and then you turn around and then suddenly it's somebody you know from work, and then that change has happened within the dream and you just accept it. And that can happen with people, it can happen with objects, it can happen with places. You turn through a door, you're somewhere else, and that's fine. And you understand that as the dreamer innately, and that something that had some significance has taken on a different meaning and different significance without it having to be addressed. It's just that is your dream logic. So when he's trying to get that sort of dream logic across on screen, that has to be explained to the audience to sort of, and it's kind of a bit like, to me, that's kind of where it starts to. I see a little bit less interesting.
I might be wrong here. I don't think that's what's going on here at all, because there's a thing within, I think it's Shinto Buddhism is the Japanese religion. There's a thing where all objects have a spirit. So I took it to be quite literally that these were the spirits of the peach trees, and that they were turning up to basically go, you've cut us down, so we're off. In the same way that in Spirited Away, for example, the dragon is the spirit of a river at the end, and there's all these spirits that are spirits of certain things. So I thought they were quite literally the spirits of the trees.
Right.
One of the shortcomings of the film, I think, in general, is that especially because it's called Dreams and it's supposedly based on dreams, is that exactly what you said about dreams. I don't think is reflected in this film. I don't think any of these films run on a kind of dream. Any of these shorts run on a kind of dream logic. I don't think any of them have that feel of dreams. And I'm not a massive fan, for example, of David Lynch. Like I find a lot of that sort of surrealism and abstraction and strangeness often isolating, and I don't really. I feel a disconnect from it. But I feel like David Lynch's dreams would probably be a much stronger approximation of what dreams are like than this film is.
There's
David Lynch
there's a thing when you watch a David Lynch film, even if you don't necessarily understand it, you get the feeling that on some level he does, and that there is an internal meaning to it, even if it's inaccessible. It feels there is a consistency in a David Lynch film that's more than just random surrealism for surrealism's sake. And that dream logic seems to, or at least feels to, at a very subjective level for me, seems to. I trust the film. I trust the film is doing something deliberately. Maybe foolishly. Maybe that's not the case. But like you said, there seemed to be a lack of real dream logic in these dreams. I like the dancing. It I think looked like that had inspired the opening scenes of Act of Killing. When they're dancing out the giant fish thing. But also there was, talking about how beautiful the last one is, there's a lot of the choreography seems to be shot on this really shaky long lens at the end as well, that just looked a little bit just lacked craft to me.
There is a bit of that, because there's a bit during one of the later dreams called The Weeping Demon, where I know what you mean. There are some sort of long lens shots where you'll see these bigger establishing shots of these demons, which we'll talk about later in more detail, but you'll see these shots of these demons kind of going crazy around this pool of water, and then you'll suddenly cut to some that look like they're almost just cropped close up.
I didn't mind it in that section. It's kind of a nightmare section, but this was this kind of really elaborately staged and choreographed kind of painting almost, and it just seemed out of place to have a overly shaky long lens camera on it. I don't know, it didn't look
I don't disagree with you. I think as well, I gave this one 2 out of 5, by the way. I don't know if I actually got a score from you for Fox Wedding. Oh, you said 3.5, didn't you?
I would have gone 2.5 on this one. I would have
2.5 on this one. Okay.
Yeah, because I like the start. I like there's 5 of us. There were 6, and all that kind of. There was a bit of intrigue at the beginning.
I think for me, this is the beginning of the end, because of the sign of what's to come, because it's so talky, and because you get to this bit where there's, in my memory of it, I know I only watched it yesterday, but my memory of it might be wrong. In my memory of it, the kid turns up and looks at all of these figures on this hill, and then they talk at him forever. And that is how all of the dreams go, basically, from this point on. Somebody turns up and talks at Kurosawa forever. Yeah. And that is what the dream is. And I cannot fathom that decision. And in fact, I'm going to be a massive hypocrite here, because The Blizzard, which is next, is the worst thing Kurosawa's ever made, and it's awful, and I hate it. And that doesn't really have any dialogue in it. Like, that's just visual. So I'm not happy on either end of the spectrum, Craig.
It's just people walking through a snowstorm for 10 minutes.
Is it 10 minutes? I felt like it was half an hour.
Like, not even talking to each other. Just walking, just going on forever. It felt like a scene from another movie, like from some sort of disaster film when they were halfway through. But in that version, even in a Roland Emmerich film, you would at least know, you'd at least know who was the guy who was in the Strange Family, who was the funny one, who was the slightly cowardly one, and there'd be some stakes to it. But this is just it just goes on and on and on. And then they stop for a bit and they say, "Oh, we should have left earlier." So, and he goes, well, we can't do anything about it now. We got to keep going. And the others are like, nah, let's just stop here. And everyone's a little bit kind of, they're not entirely aware of some of them are aware of the danger and some of them aren't. And then this snow angel turns up and goes, oh, it's not that bad. The snow's actually really warm. It's keeping you warm. You'll be fine. And just have a little sleep in the snow and you'll be fine. And then they wake up and they walk a little bit more.
They're all fine.
And that's it. Am I wrong?
You're not wrong. The only thing I think we're possibly missing is the character of this woman on the mountain, who's this kind of, like you said, like this snow angel, this mountain ghost, whatever she is. I think she's something in Japanese folklore in particular, because the very same spirit, I think, is in one of the sections of Kobayashi's Kwaidan. There's a very similar section in Kwaidan with this like mountain ghost.
It really doesn't matter because there's no story. They're just walking.
Sure, look, but what I'm allowing for the possibility of is if you've got some context of this spirit, that possibly makes there be some greater meaning or something to it. To me, it is literally, as you say, it's a bunch of people, they're in the snow, and then exactly what you said happens, but it takes forever. The only things I'll say about it is that it looks really beautiful because it's everything is blue. Everything is like translucent and blue. The skin of the people looks blue. The white snow looks blue. It's got this kind of very deliberate look, which I kind of liked. Also, the makeup on this spirit is really good. There's some kind of interesting horror makeup stuff towards the end of the section. But I've given it half. I've given it 0.5 because I hate it, Craig. I hate it. Make it go away. Turn it off. I don't want to watch it again. What do you give it?
I'll go for a 0.5 as well. We're averaging out the same here.
Yeah, exactly. So the next one
was the one that kind of the next one that for me I quite enjoyed to begin with. I thought it felt very Russian. Felt very Russian. It felt kind of a little bit Tarkovsky. So there's a guy in army fatigues walking home, comes up to a tunnel, and
that's the name of this one.
And a German Shepherd approaches the guy in the fatigues, and then he walks through this tunnel, which is a little bit kind of foreboding. Comes out the other end, and then there's footsteps behind him, and there's this revenant of a dead soldier, who comes up to him and says, "I'm going home," and he has to say, "No, you're not going home. You're dead. You died. I was there. You died." And he went, "Are you sure?" He goes, "I don't feel very dead." Yeah, no, you're definitely dead. And then the soldier kind of accepts it, goes back into the tunnel, and then out comes a whole platoon of soldiers who come out and go, "We're all going home." And he goes, No. You're all dead. You're all definitely dead. They say, "Are you sure we don't feel dead?" And he goes, "Yeah, you're dead." And then they go back in.
Well, he turns out he's their commander, isn't he? And he blames himself for them all being dead because he survived, but his whole platoon got wiped out. But it is basically what you say it is. Then the dog comes back, and then it's the end. I'm going to start with a positive on this one. Again, I think it's beautiful.
Makeup's great.
The makeup is great. The soldiers look really good. There's some really interesting images. The tunnel's really interesting. The German Shepherd that runs up to him at the start is like an anti-tank dog. It's got all those bombs on it for charging at tanks. And then you go through the tunnel, and there's this really ominous feeling. Like it feels like this short is going to be a horror one, doesn't it? Like it feels like some horrifying thing's going to happen. And then, because this is the first, I think I'll give this context here for the making of this film. This is the first film Kurosawa wrote on his own since Those Who Trod the Tiger's Tail. And what's Those Who Trod the Tiger's Tail like, Craig? It's people talking to each other forever. That's what that film is. And that's what this film is. Because the thing is you get this amazing setup. You get this really cool mood. You get this beautiful thing. And then you get these soldiers turn up with this amazing makeup. And then they talk at him forever, and he talks at them forever. And the crux of the conversation is basically what you said, but it goes on for a long, long time. And it's something that could be done visually. It could be done in much more nuanced, condensed sort of dialogue, but it doesn't have that at all.
I think the main problem with this one, because I quite like, I put this approach is having a story. The main problem is it starts so well, and it kind of, and it's so intriguing up to a point. And then just gets talked to death, basically. It's quite sparse visually as well. There's only a handful of shots that it cuts between these sort of high angles, looking down into the tunnel and through the tunnel to the other end. But it just loses its way very quickly.
It does.
Yeah.
I think I wrote in my notes that I think there's a good version of this one in the edit. Like, I think if you trim down the talking a bit, I think you can make a really tight one out of this. That'd be really nice. But it's bloated. They're all bloated for a film that's only these kind of only 2 hours of 8 15-minute sketches. So many of them feel bloated in this way. And something I wanted to mention about this one, I forgot to mention actually about Ran. Last week, it was in my notes, but I never mentioned it. That Ishiro Honda, the director of the original Godzilla and the director of all of the a lot of the subsequent Godzilla movies of the 60s, Ishiro Honda was a lifelong friend of Kurosawa. He hadn't made a film since 1975. That was his last film. But on Ran, Kurosawa brought him in to be a kind of on-set consultant and second unit director, and that's something that Ishiro Honda continues on this film. Ishiro Honda's in the credits as being a consultant. Part of the stuff I've read around the film suggests that Kurosawa also had him on this to do with the effects, because he made more effects-heavy films than Kurosawa, so he was kind of a consultant for that. But the reason I bring it up here with this short with the tunnel is that these are supposed to be Kurosawa's dreams, and they're supposed to be in some way almost biographical elements of his psyche. But Kurosawa didn't serve in the war. Kurosawa didn't lose men. He wasn't a commander of a platoon. But those are Ishiro Honda's experiences. And one of the things Ritchie brings up in his book about this, Donald Ritchie in the films of Akira Kurosawa, is he talks about how, or maybe it wasn't the Ritchie, actually, it might have been an essay in the Criterion booklet for Dreams, but whoever it was saying that Ishiro Honda's story seems to have been this dream rather than Kurosawa's, which again puts paid to the idea that these are literally Kurosawa's dreams. I mean, he didn't dream Ishiro Honda's fears, you know what I mean?
Let's go on to Crows then.
Okay, so Crows is where we're having the big difference.
We didn't.
Tunnel rating.
Yeah,
I gave it a 2.5 because I really liked the first half, and then it shits the bed. You gave it a 2. Yeah. Okay, so Crows, I think, is where we're having the big difference of opinion. I think this is where you don't like the effects, maybe.
Yeah, basically.
So basically, just to give it a summary, you get this Kurosawa stand-in, you're shot from behind. He's looking at Van Gogh pictures in a gallery, this kind of fantasy gallery where all of his most famous pictures are right next to each other, rather than you having to go look at loads of other crap in between. This is
the one moment in the film which I thought actually felt dreamlike, where he's looking at the painting and then it cuts and he's in the painting, because that's that kind of dream logic geography that you kind of get. And I thought, oh, this is nice. So he's in the gallery and he's looking at a painting, and all of a sudden he's in the painting, and
he's in the painting. And that painting, I don't know the name of this particular painting, but it's one of these washerwomen by the river and this bridge. And when he goes in the painting, I think there's an amazing bit of production design. I absolutely love it, which is where they've made this bridge exactly as in the painting, and they've made the individual bricks and things on the side of it so that they match up with the kind of impressionistic brushstrokes, and it looks like that bridge in live action.
Yeah,
and
no,
even
in SD, it looks stunning. It looked really, really stunning.
And then you've got these washerwomen who he goes up to and talks to in French. And just as a bit of trivia, the washerwoman who talks back to him in French is Kurosawa's longtime translator. I think she's called Catherine. I've got her name down there. I started, so I'll finish. She's called, what's her name? Anyway, I'll find it later. But in any case, they're... Catherine Cadu, that's her name. So she's the washerwoman who tells him, oh, you're looking for Van Gogh, he's that way. And so he goes walking through some of these landscapes, like in these Van Gogh pictures he's seen, like the field, they like wheat fields or something, the kind of the big sort of fields that he walks through. And then he finds Van Gogh played by Martin Scorsese.
I thought it was Louis C.K. I thought a red-headed Martin Scorsese was Louis C.K.
So he talks to Martin Scorsese, and Martin Scorsese, because this is Akira Kurosawa's dreams, he just rants at the Kurosawa standing for a bit, and he just tells him about how he views the creative process, and then he walks off, and then the Kurosawa character goes through some other pictures and walks literally through some pictures, and then he appears back in the gallery. I mean, that's the high-level overview of what happens in this short. So
I like this
what were
film.
your...
I like this film. I found Martin Scorsese to be really distracting, just as a piece of casting. But I liked it up until a point where he starts walking through the paintings, at which point this ILM work, the ILM need to give the money back, because it was such basic looking green screening that I honestly thought I was watching something from Sesame Street.
There's
I thought it was terrible. As he walked through these 3 or 4 different paintings, I was expecting some Sesame Street style jazzy music in the background. It looked awful, absolutely awful.
Yeah, there's a BBC kids program from the late 70s, early 80s called Innes Book of Records, which is Neil Innes from he was in loads of Monty Python films singing songs. Neil Innes doing these comedy songs. One of those songs, which you can look up on YouTube, is called Cézanne, as in the painter, Cézanne, as in a person called Anne, and it's this song about Cézanne told by this woman called Anne, and the whole music video for it is this. It's Cézanne pictures where Neil Innes is like walking through them, and this is on like the early 80s BBC TV, and it looks more or less the same as this stuff in Dreams. So I'm not disputing this in any way, but I'm lumping in with special effects here. I'm lumping in stuff like that amazing production design and things like that. Like I'm kind of all of that kind of comes in together.
I mean, to me, I think that's the problem. That is the problem to me. That the production design is so good. That shot when you're inside the painting is so well realized that when you go from that to look and read, but it's such a abrupt 180 in terms of visual quality that it just ruins it for me. And I was I was disappointed because I was enjoying it up till then. I did, like I say, Martin Scorsese I found really distracting, and the fact that when he was younger and looked in with the red hair, looked like Louis C.K. That I was distracting, but I was like, all right, fair enough. It's but that the effects work just kind of killed it for me. Absolutely
the bit of him being in the paintings I didn't mind. It's quite basic. It's not like amazing effects work, but maybe it looks different on the remastered Blu-ray version of it. But it looked quite clean to me. Like it didn't look anything special. It's just a man superimposed on some pictures, but it looked fine to me. The bit that looks really ropey when I saw it is when the crows turn up at the end.
That looks like Birdemic.
That looks bad.
I don't know if you know, there is a film called Birdemic Shock and Awe, I think it's called, but it's known as Shock and Awe, Shock and Terror. I can't remember, but it's a really ropey, like famously so bad it's good kind of film. And those crows looks the same as in Birdemic.
In fairness to Industrial Light and Magic, I'm not sure which sections they did though, because for example, in the production I've read, it talks about them doing digitally the rainbow at the beginning, which is really good. It doesn't talk about them doing this, so it's possible that they did this internally at Kurosawa's production company did this. So I don't know exactly what the division of labor was on this. Also worth mentioning that this is 1990 and ILM's sort of digital effects. This is very much in the infancy stage, isn't it? You've had at this point like the event. Is it called The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes? You've got the
Young Sherlock Holmes
guy, Young Sherlock Holmes, that one with the stained glass window dude, and you've got things like. Terminator 2 is probably just down the road, isn't it?
Terminator 2, sorry, The Abyss has happened.
The Abyss has happened, yeah. So, but a lot of those things as well, like Stained Glass Window Man and in Abyss, they're digital effects that look, it's a bit like how the first Toy Story is like, well, let's do toys because we can only really animate something like, that looks like a toy at this point. And like in the Abyss, you've got animated kind of globules of water, and they're things that don't look particularly natural or real at this point as well that ILM are doing. So I think contextually, I'm not going to be too hard on whatever work they did do on it. And I think the rainbow.
I don't know, 'cause to me, I don't know what they did, but it looks like more or less basic green screening, which had been around for 50, 60 years at that point. So
yeah, that possibly wasn't them, or it was, and they did a bad job on green screening. So I don't know, but it was it's an interesting section anyway. I like it. Like, I've gone back and watched this one several times just on YouTube because I enjoy it. I enjoy Martin Scorsese being Van Gogh because it's stupid. It's hilarious to me. Like, it always makes me laugh. He just, I'm not going to be able to do an impression of it, but like, I love his meter and the way his intonation, and it to me is very silly. And I do think there's a kind of a logical reason for it being Scorsese, because Kurosawa is arguably sort of trying to make this thing about an artist that he's inspired by, but he's also tying it into filmmaking. And I think you're supposed to, on a very obvious level, know, this is another great artist, and he's talking about his process. So there's kind of a link there where it's Van Gogh speaking, but it's Van Gogh saying Kurosawa's views on art being said by another artist who Kurosawa admires. It's a kind of weird amalgam, isn't it, there? The bit that I think is unforgivable, more than the effects, because bad effects, like, I don't really care that much. The bit that I think is unforgivable.
I mean, I know what you mean about. I would say, I can forgive a bad effect, but that's, to me, that's partly the point. Is the idea that the stream is him wandering through these works of art. So if you can't realize that effectively, and that is integral to the story, then wait until the story when you can realize.
Yeah, I mean, to me, they didn't look bad though. Like, to me, those bits didn't look bad. To me, the only bit in this that looked bad was the bit with the crows that looked really bad. The other bits just look kind of like basic. And like I say, I'd seen that done in this Neil Innes video on TV, but it didn't look any better or worse than that. And it looked fine. The bits that are really stunning are where he manages to shoot fields and things that look so much like the paintings and do the production design stuff. But the bit I think is unforgivable in this short, that is, again, probably one of the worst things Kurosawa's ever done, is the fact that and I think this smacks a lot of Kurosawa being the sole writer on this, because there's no one to bounce off, there's no one to tell him no, don't do it that way, is the bit where Scorsese says his mental process is like a locomotive, and then it cuts to a locomotive and you see a train going, and then you hear the effects of a train. That is the most on the nose fucking thing to do as a director. You would expect, like, you teach filmmaking at art school, you would probably expect one of your students to have somebody say, it's like a locomotive, cut to a locomotive and hear a choo-choo. You wouldn't expect one of the masters of old cinema to do it. You wouldn't think a Kurosawa or a Bergman or a Fellini would cut to a locomotive really literally.
Certainly,
especially in a film called Dreams, which is not supposed to be literal.
And a film that is towards his right at the end of his career.
Yeah.
He's already made.
He's 80 years old at this point. He's been making films for 45 years.
Yeah. Okay.
I think that's the.
I forgot it, but I think I was laughing. I think I was laughing.
But I think that's very sloppy. What was your score for that one?
For that one, it's probably a 2.
See, I give that one a 4. I give that one a 4 because, I say, I've genuinely gone back to watch that one just for fun over the years because I enjoy it, and I enjoy the things to do with the production design and stuff. Carry it a long way for me. Like, there are some really beautiful images in it.
Apologize for my language there, but you gave The Exorcist a 4 on Letterboxd the other day. You're saying this succeeds on its own terms as much as The Exorcist does.
I think you've got to take my star ratings as reflective of my enjoyment of things, and not as me being a film scientist.
All right.
I'm not saying that under lab conditions this is the same as the Exorcist. I'm just saying that I really enjoy watching this sequence, and I would say if you would say to me, like, what are some of the worst things in Kurosawa's whole filmography? Some of them are from this film, for sure, right? But if you would say what are some of the best images from his filmography, that bit with the painting that turns into the bit with the bridge and the production design, that's one of the things I'm going to mention. The field in the first stream with the rainbow, that's one of the things I'm going to mention. And that's why those things carry more weight for me, because I think that you're talking in the context of this great filmmaker who's made these amazing films. Some of the images in this film are among his best work. And yes, the film overall I think sucks, but I appreciate those elements of it. So
yeah, speaking of striking, I talking about Mount Fuji and Rednecks then, which is I really like the start of this, although it has got some of those terrible effects at the beginning as well. With kind of this meltdown thing. Oh no, I'm getting confused between this and the Weeping Demon, I think.
No, this one starts with the mountain all exploding and loads of stuff on fire and like an apocalypse scenario. But it almost feels to me, I like. Well,
this is. I was going to say this is this in this one. So I mean, we'll have to address this later. This one's going to run quite long. I think I wasn't expecting it. This one and then the next one actually feel like there is a strong run through connection in a way that some of the others don't. Like that, this feels like there is, because one of the things about portmanteau films is they kind of what this doesn't have that quite a lot of or most portmanteau films would have is a spine, some connective tissue, like a through line. A framing device. There's none
one
of
recurring
that.
Character or one recurring item that passes from scene to scene or something.
Yeah, or people in a room telling stories, or you know, that's quite because it's a you know, I guess the genre the portmanteau is probably most associated with would be horror. There are examples of other genres doing this sort of thing, but it's horror where it really lives. The sort of the Amicus films of the 70s in Britain, or I can't remember. There was a really good one. Oh God, I can't remember what it was called. I watched one the other day and I can't remember what it's called, and it's really famous. And but never mind. But there's none of that. So, and the things that they kind of sort of, because there's always mileage may vary. The thing they kind of live and die by really is either the strength of the framing device, or how well they. It's I guess it's a bit like to put it in high fidelity terms, how well you make a mixtape. You know, start off, bring it up, bring it down. You know, how well can you stage this, and can you tell us a through line story? Although they're separate, can you build one to the other? And this one and then the next one do seem to have that kind of a thematic tissue between them that kind of pulls these two together. The first two do as well to a certain extent, I guess. But I was going to say this sequence here, these kind of two films, though neither of them are particularly strong, and the first one I thought seemed to be pushing the film in a direction.
Yeah, exactly. We'll come on to talk about the Weeping Demon, but the beginning of it definitely feels like it's the same character who's walked from this one into that one for sure.
Yeah.
So at the beginning of Mount Fuji and Red, you get again on a technical level, the visual effects, they're probably nothing special, but I don't think they need to be, because they are, in this instance, they almost look like this horrifying, like Hieronymus Bosch painting. There's this kind of, they're very unrealistic, but in this way where they're a kind of weird tableau where you have in the same image this exploding red mountain and these other fires going off, and then all below you see like a traffic jam and people running around and things exploding and things like that. And it seems to me like this kind of just horrific, hellish tableau that's unfolding here.
There's definitely something about you were talking about Honda earlier. There's definitely something a little bit sort of Godzilla disaster films about the start of this. That although the effects are poor, like you say, it doesn't matter quite as much. There's something a little bit heightened about this whole thing. And then you've got people in suits basically who seem to be responsible for all this. At some level, some sort of corporate level, and then and then they go through all the different nuclear materials and what specific diseases they'll give you.
Yeah, this is so. Just to go back to the Godzilla thing, like when this started, my wife Jen watching it, she said she expected Godzilla to turn up, and you've obviously mentioned Godzilla as well. And Honda actually is credited in a lot of places as being the director or co-director of this sequence. So Honda has his fingerprints all over this in the production of it as well,
Right.
which is interesting. About the other half of it, I think you know my stance on this, which is this is interesting. That's an interesting setup. Where's this going to go? Oh, it's going to go to didactic lecture, is it? And that's where this thing ends up. And it ends up with like a guy in a suit, like you say, he's just explaining all this stuff. And like I'm going to tell you about, because in the Criterion,
I've got the notes up from Wikipedia, but it's literally like that one's yellow, that one's strontium 90, that one gives you leukemia. And then it goes on like this.
It's because Kurosawa wanted this one to be about the dangers of nuclear power, to advise people about, awareness of these issues. But that's where Kurosawa often falls short, looking back at his films. Whenever he decides that he's going to like tell us a big moral lesson about the world outside of his walls.
I mean, if you take it like that, what it could be is, imagine you had a bunch of school kids on a trip, not to a nuclear power station because they wouldn't want to put this stuff forwards, but like if there was like a CND museum, you can imagine a bunch of kids in a CND museum if such a thing existed, and then we're going to watch a little movie, and then they'd put this movie on, and that would be the 15 minutes of all the dangers to terrify the school kids from the 80s.
Kurosawa had this idea that this scene was so potent that this is why he couldn't get funding in Japan to make this movie, because the big studios were too worried about upsetting big nuclear energy. That's got to be nonsense. That can't be the reason, because this is just not going to move the needle on anything. And also because we've seen so many Japanese films from the preceding 20, 30, 40 years which have talked about nuclear proliferation, nuclear energy, the dangers of the bomb, that it must just be an excuse, I think, on his part there. But the final note I've written on this one is same as I've said about a lot of these dreams. There is no way he dreamt this. Like he possibly could have dreamt, there was this big red sky and there was a big nuclear meltdown and it was terrifying, but there's no way he dreamt. And then a man from the nuclear company explained what each isotope does or whatever. Like, there's no way. Absolutely not.
A Weeping Demon afterwards kind of feels kind of like feels a lot like a sequel. So there's
the disappointing sequel to a rubbish bit of dreams.
So there's this nuclear wasteland, and there are these tortured, mutated people who we learn through people talking can't die and just sort of roll around on the nuclear ashes, howling in agony. And that all of these people are in some way responsible for the nuclear holocaust, and this is like their purgatory hell and their punishment. And there's these dandelions in there for some reason as well that grow,
which they look like they're normal sized, and then when the characters all touch them, you realize they're massive, which is the only bit of this sequence that's good. My notes for the Weeping Demon, the first note is just sequel ? And then the second note is blizzard level boring. Because that is my second note on this, because it's the same. It's the worst elements of this film, where the Kurosawa guy, he meets this demon, followed by 10, 15, maybe 20 minutes, I don't know, felt like forever, of the demon just telling him stuff, which is just not what you'd expect. If you imagine a film called Dreams, and it's going to be a visionary, very visual filmmaker with a very stylish back catalogue,
you are famously much more angry about this film than I'm
not. I mean, you can interpret passionate as angry if you like, but that's not where I'm trying to come from on this. What I'm saying is, if you had this, you've got this filmmaker who's famous for really slick editing. He's got great visual style. He's made all these really kinetic, action-packed movies, and now he's going to show you these tableaus of these dreams. The last thing you want to sit through is these people just telling you like the worst thing, the thing you said that's boring about dreams is now someone's just going to tell you something that's interesting to them but not particularly interesting to you. I feel like he's very accurately reflected that in some of these, where you just have somebody just telling you something for ages and you just want them to stop. And I think the Weeping Demon is probably the second worst one. Like you didn't give a rating to Mount Fuji in Red, right? I gave it 3 out of 5 just because I'm a sucker for anything that's vaguely to do with fear of the bomb in Japan. You gave it 2.5. Weeping Demon, I've given 1.5. And that's because I like the makeup of the demons. I like the big dandelions. I like the shot near the end where there's like dozens of demons all writhing around being ridiculous. I like that.
I would be in agreement with you on the Weeping Demon. I think that I like the visual setup, and I like the idea, and I like the makeup, and I like the concept, and then it just becomes a talkathon. And again, it was it's the other thing that's done really, really well. It's got it sets up a horror film really well in the same way that The Tunnel does, I think, but doesn't quite deliver it. But yeah, let's do the last one, and then I've got a few other thoughts about generally around the film.
Okay, so the last one is called Village of the Watermills.
This looks beautiful.
And it looks brilliant. And at the beginning of it, I've written, looks pleasant. That's my first note. And then this fella, the Kurosawa fella, walks through these amazing area of these watermills, which are all spinning, rotating on this beautiful picturesque river, across these nice wooden bridges. And then he comes across Chishu Ryo, the actor who's in loads of Ozu films. He's the old fella in Tokyo Story. Somehow he's still alive in 1990, still playing an old man. And he plays this old man who's sitting down at the watermill. And then the old man gives an Old Man Yells at Cloud lecture where he talks for ages about how young people just care too much about new stuff and technology, and you should probably just not do all of that. And actually, it's better if you just do fuck all and live on the land and whatever the hell. And he talks forever about these things. And gradually, it becomes more and more like, and this is intentional in the film, it becomes more and more like, sorry, I've my phone is on silent, but for some reason that is not affecting it. It becomes more and more like this guy is going to go on to become obviously like a trumper or something. Like the longer the conversation goes on, like that's what Jed said watching it as well. It sounds like an awkward conversation where this guy sat next to an old man at a bus stop, and the old man starts talking about oh well, it starts off very nicely. Like, oh, well, I live on the land. Oh, I generate my electricity this way. It's a simple life. Well, it's nice to be alive, isn't it? But it starts getting more and more reactionary. You kind of expect by the end this guy's going to start talking about Brexit. Like that's how I felt about it. And then after this guy's talked forever, he says, "Oh, it's nice to be alive," and he puts on a nice hat and he gets a bell out, and then he goes and joins a parade, and that's basically the end.
Yeah.
What were your thoughts on Village of the Watermills?
It looked lovely. And yeah. And then you get to hear about how this village works. And then it, even Kurosawa clearly didn't care that much about it, because the avatar for him finishes the conversation and then leaves the village himself. It's like, yeah. Okay.
It just to me, this was summing up a lot of the film. I think Village of the Watermills is an encapsulation of everything that's great and terrible about this film. Like it looks beautiful. There are some lovely ideas. There's a nice setup. There's stuff to look at that's nice. And then there's bits where Kurosawa goes on a bit of a rant and tells you about what he thinks about the modern world and all of its pitfalls. And that is every dream, almost, with the exception of the Blizzard, which is somehow the worst one.
So this is my question to you, having watched it. So last time you mentioned you'd seen this before, but only in parts, out of order, on YouTube, in over a period of time. Did the film lose anything for you by watching it in one go on Criterion Blu-ray?
Yes. Yes, it did. Because the way I'd watched it before, I think I'd even seen them in order, but I'd watched them as individual YouTube videos, and I'd seen them. I remember the first time I watched them. Do you remember the original iPods when they could first do video?
Yeah.
I downloaded them onto my iPod and watched them on the bus on an iPod, on a little square iPod screen. Phil and I remember really liking, for example, Crows, and I remember really liking Mount Fuji in Red in isolation and watching those ones a few times. And the rest of them, like Blizzard and stuff, I'm guessing I only watched the once and then never watched again. So in my mind, the highs of Dreams were kind of like what Dreams was, and the ones that I didn't like as much, I guess I'd never revisited or thought about. So yes, watching it all in one go definitely diminished the experience.
Can we clip that out and send it to Christopher Nolan, please?
Yeah, it's not a very sophisticated film lover opinion, but no, I did not enjoy watching Dreams all the way through. And in fact, and I know this sounds cheap given it's called Dreams, but it almost put me to sleep, very genuinely. Like towards the end of seriously though, towards the end of the third one, my eyes started to drip a bit, and I was saying to myself, oh, maybe I should go for a nap. And I'll watch the rest later. And I thought, no, I'm going to watch this all in one go because I've not done that before, and I'm going to watch it. But it really bored me, a lot of it. And talking about it to you now, I feel like 2 is generous. Like I feel like I've gone too overboard. I feel like I've praised it too effusively. What's your overall feeling of it as a package, Craig?
I don't know. It's difficult, isn't it? It feels.
I think you're torn. I think you're torn between your original dismissal of it and wanting to wind me up now by liking it slightly more than me.
I think I probably do like it slightly more. But I don't know. To me, it stinks of kind of self-indulgence, but also being indulged by a bunch of new Hollywood directors, sycophantic new Hollywood directors, you know, kind of urging somebody on to kind of, you know, coming from a good place, wanting to get a master filmmaker who
one of their heroes
who finds it impossible to make a film. You know, we're talking about Spielberg, who's just made the third Indiana Jones film. You know, we're talking about Scorsese around about the time of Goodfellas. You know, we're talking about people with real kind of clout, trying to help one of their heroes along, but kind of falling into some of those auteurist traps as well of, you know, like, you know, whatever comes from somebody's mind is bound to be gold. And I think it's a quality control thing. And I think there's some nice ideas in here. I mean, this is the sort of film that I would usually be really there's plenty about this that I'd usually be really fond of. For me, this kind of, there is a hint of Southland Tales or Cloud Atlas or Jupiter Ascending or something like that. It's the kind of folly that I usually feel quite warm to, but at the same time there's an archness to it. There's a sight and sound archness to it that that also kind of upsets me a little bit. Do you know what I mean?
I do, although I think its major flaw in him being indulged is him being the sole writer of it, or the sole credited writer of it, if Honda contributed perhaps to some of the dreams, and being so didactic. Like we've seen at earlier points of his career, bits in One Wonderful Sunday, or bits in Akira, or bits in some of his great films where he'll want the characters to turn to the camera and say, think of the real social issues, everybody. This is very important. Gangsters are bad, by the way, or whatever it is he's got in his head to tell us all that film. And I think that this film is 8 of those back to back to some extent, more or less. Like, they're not all like that, but most of them are like that. And that's the least appealing part of what he does as a director. And I think he's really indulged in that on this one. This won the Palme d'Or, by the way. Like, this was a Palme d'Or winner at Cannes, this film. There's a documentary on the Blu-ray where Bertolucci, who is the president of the jury,
they are full of shit at Cannes, aren't they?
But there's a documentary on the Blu-ray where Bertolucci's talking about presenting the Palme d'Or to him because he was the president of the jury. I'm only bringing this up because he doesn't say anything particularly interesting about it. I'm only bringing this up because he's shown a clip of Kurosawa picking up the Palme d'Or, and it's playing the Seven Samurai music, the one that goes dun 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 dun. It's playing the Seven Samurai music, and he turns to the person interviewing him and he says, "Is that the national anthem playing?" And the reason I point this out is to say Bertolucci is a fake Kurosawa fan. That's the only reason I bring it up, because that's clearly the music of Samurai Bertolucci. You're rubbish. But that's the only reason I'm going to bring it up.
Maybe it's more of a Redbeard man.
Yeah, he might be. And I did actually message you during watching this documentary, because we've talked before about a little bit about the kind of the hipster canon of Kurosawa, and most of the directors, like Hayao Miyazaki's on this documentary, he talks about Seven Samurai being his favorite film. Martin Scorsese mentions Seven Samurai and Akira, and all of these people turn up and they talk about the main famous ones, and then Julie Taymor turns up talking about The Bad Sleep Well, and someone drops in Redbeard, and I think Boon Jong-ho turns up to talk about High and Low, and I was like, okay, here we go. The hipsters have arrived. But yeah, it's there was one thing I want to bring up actually before we wrap up on Dreams. Do you know it was originally, I'm guessing, a 3-hour-long movie, which is much less palatable, because he was originally going to make 11 Dreams, right? Most of those dreams, not most of them, a few of those dreams got cut, right? But even going into production, they were still going to be filming the 9th dream, right? Which is cut from the final film. They didn't actually end up shooting it, but they were going to make a 9th dream that was going to end the film. The 9th dream, the entire script of it is in the booklet on the Criterion Collection Blu-ray, and it's by far the worst one, and I'm so glad it doesn't exist. The ninth dream was going to be that Kurosawa is in a hotel room, like in some foreign country, and he sees on the news, he starts hearing gunfire and explosions and aircraft flying overhead. And so he turns on the news, and people on the news are speaking a foreign language, and they're just talking about all these explosions going on and shouting, and he can't understand what's going on. He turns over to another channel, Russian channel. They're doing the same thing. French channel, the same thing. He finally finds the Japanese channel, and a man starts explaining that world peace has been declared, and that what's happening outside is that all of the governments of the world have decided to destroy all of their weapons, and everyone is taken to the streets now to celebrate. And then the rest of the dream is that he sees people in different national dress, which fucking hell. So I guess a Mexican in a sombrero and shit. And he goes out into the street with all these people in different national dress. They all link arms, and they all go and celebrate world peace. And then at the very end, in a moment directly reminiscent of the worst bit in One Wonderful Sunday, they were going to have somebody turn to the audience and say to the camera, "Now please applaud world peace." That was going to be the end of this film, Craig. And if that dream that wasn't shot, that doesn't exist, if that sums up this whole movie, doesn't it? If that doesn't sum up what this film's like, I don't know what does.
I'm almost positive that someone somewhere in the world has made that and put it on the internet. I'm going to go searching for it.
Yeah, the 9th dream was going to be called A Wonderful Dream, and that was going to be the end of the film. Just a bit, it was apparently crushed for budget reasons. It was going to cost too much to get the crowds and all the weapons and everything. But that's what
they said to him.
That's what they said to him. That's what they said to him. But yeah, just following up, because you mentioned Spielberg was involved in this. He brokered the deal to help get it made by Warner Brothers. Lucas was involved with this insofar as he ILM, he let ILM work on it at cost. So ILM didn't make any money on it. They just did the work for cost. Apparently badly, if you ask Craig. I didn't think it was that bad. And then there's a slight Coppola collection as well, which is that Kurosawa and Coppola do seem to have remained reasonably good friends. They're in contact, and Coppola was a kind of broker between Kurosawa and Scorsese, getting Scorsese into the film. So exactly as you say, there's this kind of weird mass of these new Hollywood directors who are just kind of in his orbit, allowing this very self-indulgent film to get made and kind of egging it on in their own way. Enablers, basically. So do you have any final thoughts on this film?
No, I'd like to just not think about it anymore, to be honest. I'd like it just to go down. Just to go away. This is, it's definitely one of the low points in this trek through the filmography. You asked me when we were playing video games last night. You asked me what would I sooner watch, this or The Idiot, or I don't know.
Well, Sanshiro Sagata 2. There's a few kind of ones at the bottom, aren't there? The Quiet Jewel, Sanshiro Sagata 2, The Idiot.
I would probably watch this. I don't know. I'd watch this before The Idiot, based solely on runtime. And under that logic, I would watch Those Who Tread on the Tiger Tail before this.
Yes, I agree. I agree with you completely. That's exactly my thought on this. So next time around, we're on his penultimate film, which many people think's complete shit. I actually quite like it. It's called Rhapsody in August. It's semi-famously got Richard Gere in it. Do you have any expectations for this film? Do you know anything about Rhapsody in August?
No, I'm quite intrigued by it. I think I got a feeling I've got a suspicion I might warm to this one. I know that it's something to do with somebody revisiting or revisiting the war. Is it the only film with a major role by a Western actor or a Western star?
Yeah, I think so. I unless I'm forgetting something. Yeah, I mean, this is the first time we've certainly seen any sort of named American actor turning up in one of his movies. So yeah, interesting from that point of view. I'm really interested to. I've only seen this one once. This was probably the last Kurosawa film I saw in terms of completing him. This was like the final one I was able to find. And I've only seen it once. So I'm looking forward to revisiting it. And I'm really looking forward to hearing what you have to say about it. So we'll do that. We'll do that next week or the week after. But I'm looking forward to it.
Charles.
Excellent. Well, thanks as always, Craig. Thanks for everybody who listened and watched. And we'll see you next time.